Okay, welcome everybody. Welcome to our session on the power of law. How are you doing? How's the energy? It's late in the day. There's been a lot of sessions. I'm going to start off by trying to get your attention. And I want everyone to put your hands in the air. Everyone to put one hand in the air. And I want you to think about how the law and legal systems impact on you and your personal life. And I want you to give me a show of fingers. Number one finger would be, you never really think about the law and legal systems. And number 5 would be, this dominates every moment of your waking life. 2, 3, 4 would be in the middle. Show me. Okay, we have some 2s, some 3s, some 5s from the panelists. It should be a few 4s. Interesting to see the cultural nuances, the Germany-based people, the France-based people. So, this session, right now, and to move to a more somber note, across the world right now, we're witnessing a real rollback of basic freedoms. Rise in authoritarianism, dangerous, worrying weakening of the rule of law. Great writer Naomi Klein described this as our critical moment in history. And also in this critical moment in history, we're seeing legal systems used in bold and beautiful ways to challenge governments and corporations, give voice to people who've been denied agency and nature itself. We've got a brilliant lineup of people from across civil society, indigenous leaders, who are going to talk us through the power of law and how that can be used to protect people and planet. So to open this session, I'm really excited to introduce someone who really stands in the face of power and speaks the truth. As Secretary General of Amnesty International, she's a real fearless advocate for international law as a tool of protection and justice. Welcome to the stage, Agnès Callamard. Welcome.
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here, even though the topic is not necessarily very joyful. The rule of law is under attack. The principle-based durable means by which public power is made accountable, is obliged to respect norms, is restrained from overreach. That rule of law today lies battered, mocked, trampled on, internationally betrayed, and nationally eroded. Even in the richest countries, those with the resources for social stability, economic predictability, those that long ago prided themselves on their independent judicial institution, clear separation of power, governments and elite are intentionally attacking the rule of law. And on the global stage, the same architect of the rule-based order that arose out of the ashes of World War II, out of the ashes of the Holocaust, in fact 80 years ago, those very architects are now dismantling the legacies, dismantling what they constructed 80 years ago. The Genocide Convention, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the Convention for Women, Convention Against Racial Discrimination, and the UN Charter, and many more. I hear some of you, I'm having problems with my phone. I hear some of you suggesting that maybe this attack is recent, that maybe it's only 100 days old. But no, sadly, it is not. China's action against the people of Hong Kong has been years in effect, being imposed now through a new legal framework, a rule by law that violates the rule of law. Russia's aggression against Ukraine, now 3 years old, an ongoing blatant violation of the UN Charter that underpin the international rule-based order. And of course, were it not for the full support of the United States and acquiescence of other Western governments, Israel's genocide of Palestinians in Gaza could not have been perpetrated. Just 3 examples from 3 members of the UN Security Council. I could have cited examples from Sudan, Myanmar, DRC, Afghanistan, other examples where states arbitrarily claim universal standard and international law do not apply to them, do not apply to their special circumstances, whereby using the UN Security Council veto, the world's most powerful state shield themselves from accountability. And the accumulation of all that is that by 2025, international law and the rule of law globally is on its knee. The rule of law, bending knee to power, as power seeks to set itself above the law. So surely you're going to tell me, okay, that's all about territorial competitions, territorial grab, military occupation. Surely the breakdown of the rule of law cannot apply to climate, cannot apply to that existentialist threat. Well, think again. First, as a segue, let me highlight the fact that war causes long-term environmental damage and that armed conflict around the world account for 6% of annual greenhouse emission worldwide. Let me highlight that Ukrainians are accusing Russia of committing the crime of ecocide, and that Palestinians are accusing Israel of doing exactly the same. But returning to climate and the rule of law, the 10-year-old Paris Agreement was hailed as a success, and it was a success. I remember the day when it was adopted, and it was already in an era where we were not expecting multilateral instrument to deliver anything, and it did. But I was at Davos this January, when the US announced yet again that it was withdrawing from that agreement and revoking its financial commitment to the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. Shockingly, and I don't know whether anyone else was at Davos, shockingly but not surprisingly, many at Davos saluted the decision, corporate actors, and indeed some government, explaining that climate regulation had gone too fast. There were too many of them, and really they were too burdensome. Too fast. Severe drought, catastrophic flooding, fire infernos, intense storm, rising sea level, killing more with each passing year, forcing people to flee their home. Too fast. 2024 was the world hottest on record. And I was at COP2. And at COP29, we watched with horror and with 1,770 fossil fuel lobbyists, states failing to make any progress to reduce our fossil fuel dependency. Too many regulations. Donald Drill, baby drill Trump, did not just withdraw the US from the Paris Agreement. He has gutted America's domestic climate policies, slashed spending for clean energy, undermined funding for solar and wind projects, eviscerated decades of work to protect Americans from corporate abuses of the environment. What's more, his administration is now targeting environmental groups across the country, freezing funding, threatening their tax status, and indeed victimizing, criminalizing groups such as Habitat for Humanity. So you're going to tell me that the US, surely the rest of the world is a little bit more sensible. Surely elsewhere climate activists are protected by the rule of law, by the power of law. Surely elsewhere their work are respected. Well, dear friends, not at all. Instead, for climate matters across the world, the rule of law has become far too often the rule by law. Hastily enacted laws, arbitrarily applied policies target environmental activists, seeking to silence them, to prevent their action, to stymie their critique. Climate activists in Europe increasingly face criminalization, stigmatization. The French government ordered the dissolution of les soulèvements de la terre, which a court later found to be unlawful. The rule of law worked on that case. The UK passed draconian legislation to specifically target environmental activists by criminalizing some of their tactics of protest. In Germany, laws used against the Red Army, you're too young, most of you, to remember. Laws used against the Red Army are used against environmental activists now. Yet, even so, across the globe, people are defiantly demanding that politicians take action against climate collapse. Do they disturb and disrupt? Yes, of course. Yes, of course, they do. But their civil disobedience is a right and a central dimension of how we are making our voice heard. So yes, they must disrupt. It is how non-elite voices are amplified. It is how governments can be held accountable. It is how power can be made to course correct. But instead of upholding, celebrating the civic engagement, the solidarity that is being demonstrated, around the world, climate activists are derided, ostracized, abused, stigmatized, as if somehow terrorists. They are also killed in their dozens upon dozens. The largest number of killed human rights defenders in the world are environmental and climate activists. The largest number. Defending the climate can be a death toll for you. This is the rule of law we are confronting. The law is being turned upside down, used against the very people it is designed to protect, by the very people it was designed to restrain. Of course, there is more to this story than weaponization of the law alone. There are many examples, and we will hear more, of people like many of you grabbing the law and trying to make the law work for us and for the environment. In 2022, the UN General Assembly declared that access to a clean and healthy environment is a universal human right, underscoring a determination that international law and our global institutions be made fit for the purpose. Just a year ago, the European Court for Human Rights issued landmark climate decision, finding that the Swiss government had not complied with the European Convention when it failed to set and meet clear limits on greenhouse gas emission. Last year, thanks to the vision and courage of a coalition of youth in the Pacific Island and Vanuatu, a country on the front line of the climate crisis, the International Court of Justice has held an historical hearing on the human rights obligation of state vis-à-vis climate change. And by the end of 2024, there were 86 climate lawsuits that had been filed against the world's largest fossil fuel producers. Many of them are headquartered on this continent. Is that enough? Is that enough? Well, I think you have the answer already. That is not enough. It is not even enough to meet the Paris Agreement at the rate we're going, of the 1.5 degrees. So, not enough to prevent preventable death, not enough to prevent thousands of people to flee their home and lose everything, and it is certainly not enough to meet the heightened challenge we are confronting. Climate deniers in power, in the most powerful countries in the world, emboldening the many, many other would-be powerful climate deniers, emboldening the many, many more who, with utter disregard for future generations, continue their same greedy, selfish, nihilistic pursuit of endless growth and unsustainable profit margins. So it is not enough. So what can we do? I hear, and I've heard yesterday and today here, that we need less doom and more hope. Yeah, I think, I wish I could provide less doom. And I said too that to deserve hope, we must act with courage. First, what shreds of meaningful hope there are will be found only in meaningful action. And for that, we must first act brave and braver. Braver in our resistance, more visionary in our transformative demands, and more courageous in our joint action. Dear friends, we must resist. Resist. In our lifetime, never has there been a more important time on a global scale to resist and to disrupt. To resist the attacks on human rights by speaking up for truth, for science, for evidence, and for the rule of law. To resist and disrupt the false narrative, the failed idea, and the appalling double standards that have become the hallmark of our times. To resist the dehumanization, the hard-hearted calculus of so-called tolerable harms. To resist and disrupt by speaking truth to power. To engage in civil litigation. To demand laws criminalizing climate activists be repealed. To demand that standards protecting the environment be implemented. To come together to better document, report, publicize what they are doing to our environment and to our life. And if we are privileged enough to live in a place where speaking up is not yet criminalized, we must use our rights to protect the rights of others. We must demand protection by the rule of law against intimidation by rule of law. And if resistance is not enough, and it won't be, we need to transform. We need to transform by demanding that states meet their obligation to future generations, by imposing necessary restriction on the unsustainable use of natural resources. We must demand changes to the global taxation system to prevent the current annual loss of $500 billion to tax abuse, so that those funds can be invested where they are needed for mitigation, for protection. We need to demand that universal income be guaranteed, to support all those facing loss of income, employment, because of the digital industrial revolution. We must demand that the way we measure human progress be shifted away from GDP towards metrics that focus on equality, dignity, sustainability. We must demand that international governance be transformed. We must demand an end to the use of veto by Security Council members in issues related to peace and security. That's a journey of 1,000 steps that begins with just one, the step of courage. You'll hear you need hope. I'm telling you, you need courage, you need to stand up, and you will find hope in acting, in action, in resisting, in disrupting. The courage to resist, to defy, and to transform. That is what is needed. Thank you.
Thank you, Agnes. It's fantastic.
Sorry, it was...
No. Thank you so much, Agnes, for speaking truthfully and forcefully about the steps we need to take and to start them with courage.